Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang anuttarang upajjhayang namasami. Is this okay for everyone? Would you like? Yeah, you can hear? Okay, very good. I'll try to keep my voice up. Hopefully the live stream can hear me. It's a very nice feel coming in to this hall here and being with all of you. I feel very happy. I have a sense of mudita for all of you and for Ajahn Nisabho. I think, have you been here a full year?
Not quite.
Now? Not quite a year, okay.
July.
Very good. So it's quite wonderful to have so many of you. I don't usually draw so many crowds myself, so well, this is really nice to see. And yeah, so there's a good feeling, a sense of rejoicing. Ajahn Nisabho and I were together at the Pacific Hermitage. I think that was about a year ago, just about a year ago that we parted ways there. And we were doing some Dhamma discussions with each other. And that's how I think a lot of this started. So it's quite nice now to see the fruits of this. And there's an interest in the Dhamma, an interest in the teachings, and having a monk around, seen as a good thing, a helpful thing in the world. As we were driving here, I saw an ambulance going in the opposite direction, and I thought, oh, there's a heavenly messenger there. This is a reminder of someone who is sick, or even possibly dying. And so there's 4 heavenly messengers, and seeing a monastic, seeing someone who is engaging in a spiritual life is also one of them. So that can be a sense of an uplifting quality of, oh, right, there's something that I too can strive for, I can be interested in. And there's a draw towards that. There's a draw towards spirituality. And just want to pose a question to you all. What is it that draws you here? What is it that draws you in to want to partake in these teachings? Why is it that you meditate? And what brought you here today? So for a lot of people, where this interest comes from in terms of bringing the mind to peace and calm, it's not usually coming from a feeling that I'm perfect and nothing could be better. Because then there'd be no reason to be here. So there's a sense possibly of imperfection, or not quite a sense of wholeness or completion. There might be a sense, just even sometimes vaguely, yeah, it's just not quite right. So there's a story I've heard one teacher tell about, like there was a group of people at a certain possibly ceremony, but they were waiting for a monk who was a visiting monk, and this is in Thailand, and this monk was late. He was coming from the airport. And so he was quite late, so they decided to ask another monk who was there to give a talk, and he came in and he said, I'm going to give a teaching on Buddhism, and what Buddhism is all about is suffering. And then he proceeded with his talk, he continued with his talk, and explained what he meant by this, similarly to how I'm saying it. There can be a sense of discontent, things not quite feeling right, and that there is a way to potentially settle that. So we look towards Buddhism to resolve that suffering. But this is paramount in the teaching. And so he finished his talk, and then the other monk came in. He arrived, and they said, well, can you give us a Dhamma talk still? Can you keep going with this? And he said, okay. So he sat down, and you can guess what he probably said. Buddhism is all about happiness. And the tale doesn't end with the two monks arguing with each other. You're wrong. No, you're wrong. So in fact, they're both correct. And I would say also Buddhism is really the teaching of the resolution of happiness. It's how do we create happiness within ourselves. And similarly to how that monk was speaking about suffering, or what we call dukkha, there is a sense that we need to admit, yes, there is suffering. And that can be just that sense, like, I'm just not quite feeling completely fulfilled, or there's just this sense of something missing in my life. And so, as the Buddha calls it, we go on a search or a quest. And this is the spiritual quest that he's speaking of. And I would say everyone who is in here is on that spiritual quest. It's a search. And I would say that probably all of you, because you're here, acknowledge by just being here and engaging in this practice, even if this is the first time you've done it, that you have some faith that there is a sense of a way out of this. There's a sense of understanding, but also, as I said, finding that happiness. And I think from time to time, it's very important to bring that up with yourself, even if you've been at it a while, a sense of what is that search? What is that I'm doing? Has the search changed for me? Has the experience that I've been on, is the quest different? Perhaps for some of you it might be that you're more inspired, you're more interested. But perhaps for some of you it might be dry, it might be kind of a sense, well, is there anything else other than just watching the stories of my life and then the bell rings? Or you get frustrated because there were times maybe you had a lot of awareness and then you have a meditation when there's just no awareness. Or there's more agitation in your life and you think, where has this gotten me? I shouldn't be feeling this anymore. I should have gotten somewhere. And no, you shouldn't have. Because if you're trying to get something, it's going to be always outside of your grasp. Because that very desire to attain something is part of the problem. And yet, that doesn't mean we do not have a desire for fulfillment or for happiness. But the problem is often we wish to squander it, or keep it, or get it, or we feel greedy around it. Or we ask ourselves, why me? Why don't I have the happiness that I think everybody else does? All of these other people in the room, I bet they're 10 times happier than me. I mean, their eyes are closed. They're not moving much. They must be happy. And so that's just a sense of this sort of shame or annoyance with our own practice that isn't helpful. It's just that same dukkha that we're trying to experience and understand. We can often think about what it is that we're doing as seeking an understanding. And in order to understand something, you have to be willing to really look at it. So if you have a sense of, no, that's right, I am not a good meditator, I should just give all of this up, then you're not really seeking that understanding in that moment. You're going with your own opinion, your view. And really under that is just a sense of aversion. It's back to that, I don't like this. I'm not happy with what I'm getting. I should be getting more. It should be right by now. But if we're aware of that sense of it should be right by now, then we notice that that has a particular feeling in the body, a sense to it. It has a pattern, and we can be aware of that pattern. We can be aware of our experience, but we don't have to go with the experience. We don't have to move with our thoughts. So for many of you, this might have occurred for you, a real understanding around this when you first began meditating and you had your first sense of what it was to follow a continual experience within your awareness for more than a few seconds. And this could be just following a few in and out breaths. And in that noticing, you say, oh, there's no thinking, there's no me for a moment. There's no sense of me doing something or getting something or having to become something or putting this pressure on myself. And there can be this incredible relief. Oh, I think that's what this is all about. And then we can possibly come to an understanding. I've been lost. I've been lost in my thoughts about the past, about the future, my opinions and views, my sense of who I am, what I should be doing, how I should be doing it, my opinions about other people and what they should be doing, and how they should feel about me. And when we get just that moment of a sense of me and mine dissolving, that's where I think this inspiration and this happiness, we can see that's where this can arise. We gain peace. And we recognize that, in a sense, we are responsible for that peace, and we're also responsible for the disquiet or the discontent within us. And as we develop further in our practice, then we start to also see that it's not the thoughts that are the problem. It's our running with them, being distracted by them. And so then there might be some times in our meditation that we're actually able to step back from the thoughts and they're still occurring. I talk a lot about them like fog. You're driving down the road and there's fog and it's going from one side to the other. And so there can be a time when you realize you're no longer saying, "Get out of the way, fog," or you're thinking you can control the fog, or you stop asking, "Why is the fog here? It shouldn't be here." And you start to see, okay, there's a breath, there's an experience of knowing. I don't have to chide myself for doing the most natural thing that human beings do, which is think. This is just a product of our minds. There's nothing we have to get rid of or run away from. So for each of us, there can be a very good, maybe a helpful way that we can try to look at our path from time to time, question what it is that we're doing, how we are engaging with our practice, how we're engaging with the Dhamma. And we might have a sense sometimes, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not really sure. Maybe I should be finding a different meditation object or a different teacher, or a Tibetan tradition, that's pretty cool. It's so much more colorful. Or whatever it might be. But then you might look at that and say, wait a minute, I think that's doubt. I'm not really sure if I can answer those questions, or if they're answering them is going to really lead to anything, because possibly I'll just have more questions. And so eventually we start to question that path, and we can see, like, okay, what is it that I'm perhaps trying to get, or what is a different way that I can look at this, or what's a better understanding I can get? Perhaps things have gone dry for a while, or why is that? We can patiently endure it, and that's always a good quality, but we're also looking for ways to see what is the cause and condition here. What's the reason for this? And it could be just as simple, oh, right, there's still discontent. There's still a sense of, I'm not happy with this. I want something more. And then we can be inspired again. Oh, right, I'm just trying to get something again. And it's back to this observation of yourself and your sense of what's wrong with me, and how do I fix me? And each of us has, a different way. We'll all have come up with different answers. We'll all come up with different understandings. But what I was pointing out with doubt is that there can be an investigation of the Dhamma in a certain way that can be positive, and there's other ways that it just leads to more doubt. So we also want to be careful of our quest, careful of our search, what questions we're asking, how we're examining our experience. And to, of course, be forgiving. Have a sense that it doesn't always work out, each meditation, or possibly a situation where you have some very difficult experience come up, and you say, what did I really learn? And perhaps what you learned is the fact that you were able to know that that was a difficult condition. So you were maybe slightly more forgiving of yourself, kind to yourself. You can examine ways, oh, well, actually I did respond. Maybe I wasn't enlightened, but do I have to be enlightened? When there's a great difficulty, I can oh, okay, well, actually, there was a difference, there was a change. So these are just some words around that sense of examining our own practice, of kind of looking at our own experience, no matter what, how long we've been doing this, or what our feelings are about what we're doing. There is always that search, that interest that we can rekindle within ourselves. And ultimately, we can't really blame anybody else, or even necessarily look to somebody else to keep that interest going. We're really responsible for our own experiences. And in many ways, we're responsible for how much we bring the practice in, especially under those times when we want to say, it's not time to practice. I'm not sitting in meditation, so I'm not practicing. Because if that's the attitude, then the meditation's going to be pretty difficult. So, in one way, looking at that responsibility not as a burden, but as a great choice. As a choice that you can make that is something to rejoice in. The possibility you have of engaging with your own mind, rather than I don't want to. It's more of a feeling of, yes, this is what I get to do. Even if I feel miserable. Still possible to practice. Even that word might dissolve, so that your living is just an understanding of the Dhamma. It doesn't get dissolved into times when I'm practicing, times when I'm not, times when I'm mindful, times when I'm not. So I think I've spoken enough there for the time being, and thank you for listening, and I appreciate your all being here. Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Okay.
I don't think we need actually that one.
Okay.
I've devised a clever triple mic system. I think this will actually work and we don't have to use that one. So, thank you, Ajahn, for the talk and meditation. It's also just nice not to have to talk for a while. So we have the chance, first of all, we the chants that bordered those talks, one's an invitation for a Dhamma talk, which is a traditional thing we do at monasteries, and the final one is an acknowledgement, and usually just one person does that, and then we all sadhu together. And now we have a chance to pelt or give these two questions. So I think we have about a half an hour or so.
Sure, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. So if people have things they'd like to discuss or questions they have for either Ajahn Cunda or Ajahn Ṭhitapañño, please feel free. It's a rare opportunity we get visiting monastics, so it's worth taking the chance. And people often are wary about asking questions because they think they don't want to take up time, but realize that if you have something on your mind, it's likely many do. So it's a gift to be able to actually, ask it. So please feel free. And those on the live stream can type in any questions they have as well.
When one is dealing with repetitive thoughts that are unskillful, is there any teaching where the Buddha suggests that one take a third-person approach to the self? So actually sort of stepping outside of oneself in meditation and looking at oneself with compassion as another human being, and using that as a skillful technique to let go of some of the difficult things a person might be dealing with?
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's essentially the practice of metta and karuna. So how people engage with that, the Buddha isn't completely specific on a technique of that, but how many people engage with that is actually when they're wishing themselves well-being, or they're wanting to have compassion for themselves. There's an actual seeing yourself. So it's an image of yourself, and you're wishing that image of yourself well. Or to say something like, I care for your suffering, which is more of a karuna or compassion practice. And so it is indeed like a third person approach, because it's kind of bringing up the notion of self, or how you view yourself, rather than coming from an idealistic standpoint of I have no self and there's no purpose to actually bring up a form because there is no self. Essentially, you have to have a self to lose one. So it's actually quite helpful to have this form of how you view yourself, and then to wish that well, to wish yourself well. Some people will just say these phrases, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, and they don't need that image, but others find that image quite helpful and skillful. And it's often a soothing approach to aversion, like to kind of feeling angry, or as I was mentioning, that shame, like I'm so stupid, or I don't even know how to meditate, or I shouldn't have done that. Why did I say that? And this is kind of like it's a healing approach. It's sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a wound with some ointment that will help it. And without that Band-Aid, it's just going to fester and get worse. And often it does revolve around these repetitive thoughts, because this is what our identity is. We keep reforming it over and over again. We keep saying the same things to ourselves. I'm so stupid, or I wish I wouldn't keep making these mistakes. It's wrong of me to have done that, and also there's a sense of real forgiveness that can be brought in with that well-wishing. And also with forgiveness, I think there can come the realization that we kind of have a sense, mistakes. I mean, what we can realize is that mistakes aren't necessarily bad. They're just a pathway to clarity and understanding. So if I feel shameful around something I've done, that's coming from a sense of I should be perfect and I shouldn't make these errors. There's something wrong with me. I'm worse than others. They are better than me. Rather than, okay, this was a mistake, it's true. This was an error. This is something that would have been better for me not to have done. So we're not hiding from that fact. We're not hiding from that sense, but we then take a different angle. Rather than I'm wrong or I made the mistake and I'm bad because of that. We say, I made the mistake and now I'm going to learn from that mistake. I'm going to endeavor not to do that again. And so when the mistake comes up again in our mind, we say, oh, yep, that's true. I did that. And I'm going to try not to do it again. Rather than that turn of, oh, and I'm such an idiot. And how many times have I done that? And when am I going to stop? So that we kind of get this sense of, oh, right, a mistake is actually a good thing to allow myself to have, because then I can learn. And if I can't make mistakes, or I refuse to make mistakes, then I can't learn. So someone who is on a course of saying that their life would be perfect if they didn't make any mistakes is a person who's not going to be able to learn. We're essentially opening ourselves up to, again, as I was talking about that, understanding that dukkha. We're endeavoring to understand rather than condemn, or to have a fixed sense of who and what we are. And so as your question was talking about, it is really a sense of taking that third person aspect and saying, right, this is true, I did this. You can have a sense of what you did, but also reminding yourself it's not the end of the world, and people are usually a lot more forgivable than I am. Almost everybody forgives me a lot more than I'll forgive myself. And then what can I do about it? And sometimes it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort, especially when many mistakes have been made, or difficulties, or we're blaming ourselves for something, to see that we can't get other people to necessarily get on board. Sometimes you do something that's injurious to a relationship, and it takes a long time for that person to trust you again. But that's not, again, a reason to say I am unredeemable, I make these mistakes over and over, and so everyone's going to hate me. This is impermanence. This is an impermanent fixture. If we're actually continuing with this resolution, I'm going to learn from that and try not to do it again, then we have the possibility of people eventually seeing, like, oh yeah, that never happened again. But the important thing is how we actually look at it in ourselves and take that, as you said, that third person approach. Say, like, oh, it's okay. It's kind of like you're treating yourself like you would a child, And hopefully what I mean by that is caring. You're caring for yourself. Because we all know the difference between an abusive parent, right, and somebody who is a caring parent. But for ourselves, we tend to be the abusive parent. We tend to we can be much worse to ourselves than our own parents were. So yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking about it, and that is a metta approach. As recurring or repetitive thoughts occur to us, then we're approaching them in that way, like sort of trying to heal ourselves from that sense of discontent or negativity about ourselves. John?
Yeah, wondering if it's possible to let go of childhood trauma 100% completely.
I think that really depends on what you mean by 100% completely. I would say that the answer is absolutely yes, right? Because we have what is an enlightened being, what is an arahant, An arahant. What is an arahant? An arahant is a person who is no longer picking up that trauma, right? So they have completely let go. They are no longer suffering. So an enlightened person doesn't suffer from a past trauma. In the Buddhist time, there were several monks and nuns and lay men and lay women who they had horrible things happen to them. Some of them losing, one woman who became a nun, who became a bhikkhuni, she lost 2 of her children and her husband in one day. Just in one day. All 3 of them died. I think one from a snake bite, the husband, and then the 2 children one through a flood, or not a flood, sorry, crossing a river, and the other one, I believe, being eaten.
A bird.
Yeah, a bird ate the infant on the other side of the river. So you can imagine for a mother and wife that this wasn't too pleasant of a situation, and yet she became a nun, a bhikkhuni, and then she transcended her own suffering. She became an arahant. So it's definitely possible. But if your notion of completely means that you don't ever think about it or it never arises in your experience, I mean, maybe, but that's not my own sense of just how I experience things. Just with my practice and how it is, sort of things come up, and I still suffer around them. But it's a little bit less. They're still suffering, but it's a little less, right? Oh yeah. But also, to answer your question, that it is also something that can completely be, removed. The dukkha can completely be uprooted. So you don't suffer around that trauma. You don't have a sense of it shouldn't have happened to me, or why is it this way, or I wish it wasn't there. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way of thinking about it. I don't know if Ajahn Ṭhitapañño, you want to take a stab at that. Okay. But yeah, so that's, hopefully that helped. Yeah. Yeah. Patience and how to understand how to work with patience. Ajahn Ṭhitapañño.
Working with patients. I find being aware of the body for myself helpful, and also Reverend Heng Sure gave a Dhamma talk at Amaravati, very nice, about patience and teaching he received from Master Hua. And he told somebody, whenever you get angry, just use this mantra, patience, gotta have patience, don't get angry. And they used sort of a mantra, so I've adapted a little, so patience, gotta have patience, don't get angry, Buddhaya. So use sort of a mantra. So, and just memorizing or reading the Buddha's teachings and see how he prays it over and over again, I found helpful reminders, because if I've been reading those teachings, sometimes something will click when I'm about to lose it. So maybe there's just a few thoughts, and I'll pass it on to Ajahn Cunda.
I think that's a very good question around how to cultivate patience. Patience with microphones. Technology. What Ajahn Ṭhitapañño just said is, I think that's the foremost practice, is that it's really mindfulness. So it's like reminding yourself and keeping something in mind. That's what mindfulness really is. It's just continually keeping something skillful in your mind. And that can be a variety of things. So that can just be even just a reminder, may I be patient in this moment. The Buddha praises patience. He calls it more what's called khanti, which is, there's also an enduring quality. So it's patience with endurance. So it's not ignoring the fact that one is moving through something, enduring something that is difficult. And so as you bring that in, there is again that sense of like, okay, I'm not trying to get away from it. And it can be very intense, it can be difficult, but the ability to stay with your experience rather than find some distraction or a way to get away from it, or the convincing of yourself that if it wasn't there, you would be happy. That's the problem. So the patience is, it is here, and possibly there's some happiness that can occur if I bear with it, if I stay with it, just the experience of it. And I would say I'm not talking about actually putting oneself into a situation that is intolerable, right? In terms of intolerable being like maybe abuse or something where somebody would say like, well, I just need to stay with this abusive person and I'll realize Nibbana through that way. I wouldn't suggest that. Or this situation. Sometimes there's the sense, actually, the appropriate action is to remove myself from the situation. But that's still a possibility of practicing patience in that moment. Just saying, okay, what is the right thing to do here? How can I best endure this? But patient endurance and khanti, this how the Buddha talked about it was like a sense of, he called it burning defilements out. And defilements meaning like things like greed or hatred, aversion, anger, desire, lust, or a quality of just that kind of doubt I was talking about, like what should I do, I'm not sure, or not having faith, or a sense of like confidence. And so when I hear that sort of burning it out, I have a sense of, okay, like how Ajahn Ṭhitapañño was talking about it, it's like patience. You're being with this very difficult experience and you're not running. So you stay with it, and then even though everything in your body and your mind is saying don't stay with it, then no, I'm going to stay with this feeling, this experience telling me to run, get out of here, or I can't take it anymore. I can't stand this. And by being with that experience, we do allow ourselves, we open up to the pain of it. There's dukkha there, so there's no denial of that. But then we actually start to get interested, like, well, is there a change in that? Is it getting worse? If it's getting worse, is that okay? Can I stay with that difficult experience? When we get interested in it, then we see, actually, maybe it is changing. It's getting worse, and then it gets better, gets worse again. But we're seeing there's a changing quality. So then all of a sudden we say, this isn't permanent. This thing that I'm trying to endure, actually, I'm fooled by the fact of believing that it's always going to be like this. I can't get out of it. There's nothing I can do. That's the kind of, those are the thoughts that are really sending us into like, they're convincing us in really the wrong direction, that's not true. We can endure it. We can be with the experience. And then once we start to see that it's changing, we see that it's arising and ceasing. And so what comes at the end, possibly, of going through a very difficult time with something, an intense emotion or a situation that we don't think we can deal with, like that nun whose both of her children and her husband died in one day. She did go mad. She did have a breaking point. But then she was able to be healed through the Dhamma. And so I just have a sense that like what happens when you go through these experiences is you do see, right, I was wrong about my belief that I couldn't get through this, that I couldn't deal with it, I couldn't bear it. And that gives you the strength then to say, oh, I have the possibility of bearing so many other things if I stay with this patience, may I have patience. And you build confidence, and you build this muscle, this strength, so that patience is used as something like a sword that can cut through these difficult experiences. Because you know, I've been to the other side, which doesn't deny the difficult experience, but it says, I don't have to believe that it's permanent or that I can't deal with it. And so there can even be sometimes this, okay, I'm going to take this challenge up. I'm going to be interested in it and see what happens. And that's quite an exciting moment in one's life when instead of turning away from something, I can't bear it. So, oh, I can bear this and I will bear it. And I'm interested in seeing what happens here. Yeah, rather than the Dhamma being something that is just going to get me out of suffering, I see it as something that's helping me understand it. Yeah.
There's also a pretty interesting translation by Longpo Sumedho of Kanti, which he says it's peaceful coexistence with the unwished for. And I think it's helpful to sometimes reframe Kanti not in terms of gritting your teeth and getting through an experience, but just a sort of, sometimes the best we can hope for is a peaceful coexistence. And also I find there's something about, so often we can think of patience as like, there's an experience of suffering and we just have to let it pass before we can get back to the practice. And it's a bit like kind of trying to wade through a rushing river to get to the other side. And yet the correct way to do that is to actually face into the current so that it's going to sweep you back a little bit, but then you maintain a somewhat straight course. And I think that's the significance of the first noble truth of comprehending suffering being the foundation post and the starting point of the whole practice, is because the Buddha's really saying the way through suffering to happiness is, leaning right into the wind. Because there's not really a neutral stance towards suffering if you just kind of are undergoing something and waiting for it to get over with so you can get back to your practice. You're missing the whole point, which is that the path is right there. You just have to face into it. And I just find that those difficult experiences are so much easier when you realize that where it's dirtiest is where you need to clean. Like Ajahn Yaniko has a practice. He's the abbot of Abhayagiri, where he'll go to the workshop and find the dirtiest spot and make it the cleanest spot. And I think that's just, he said, I asked him about that. And he's like, I said, I heard you had a practice where you did this. And he said, no, that is my practice. That's my whole practice. And so, the spouse who's bothering you, the health issue which won't resolve, the boss, which is just a pain in the butt every day, that's exactly where your path is. And patience has a whole different quality when it's not just waiting for something inconvenient to pass so you can get back to the practice, but rather there's a joy to it when you realize that is your practice, So that's how I think of it sometimes as well. I think we have time for one more, maybe two more. Questions or comments? We might stretch it a little longer because we don't get these too often. One of you two, I don't know which, though. One before the other. Nastasia.
I was wondering how one should relate to the second noble truth. I've, in a moment-to-moment practice, I've heard it variously sort of translated as clinging or craving or delusion. And I'm wondering how one should approach that.
Do you want to start? Well, I think that when the Buddha, he starts with there is suffering, right? He doesn't say there that everything is suffering. He just says it's just a part of our life, and that's what makes these noble truths. Is that he's saying these are like inescapable truths. So the first one is inescapable. I don't think anybody in this room would deny that there is a sense of discontent or suffering or some difficulty that we experience in life. And I doubt that any of you have met somebody who has never had any difficulty in their whole life, because it's on a subtle level too. But then he goes a bit further and he says, there's an actual cause to why this is happening. He's not just saying that it happens and there's nothing you can do about it. He's saying there's a cause, or he hasn't gotten to the to-do yet, but he's gotten to the sense of like, there's a reason that this is occurring. And so then there's this kind of, and what's that? What is that reason? And he says it's desire, and the process of desire, as you were talking about, clinging, craving, all kinds of words for getting, or this being mine. And so, but the important aspect is he's talking about a cause, right? He's talking about a cause, that it's not random. It's not just that like people just kind of randomly get these things happening to them. Because there are these things called actions. And when we engage in actions, they have repercussions, right? And he's talking about intentional actions. So these are actions that we will, that we know that we're doing. So if you step on an ant and you don't know that you've done that, and somebody says, oh, you just killed that ant, you're going to hell for sure. He says, oh, I didn't even know it was there. And he said, actually, that was some dirt, you're wrong. So that's the wrong way of looking at it. These are intentional acts, right? So we're intending. And when we intend things that come from a sense of this getting for me and mine, this is like for me. And it's that sense, as you think of the mind like actually reaching out. And there's a sense like, almost a feeling like I can't stop myself. I have to have this. It should be this way. I better get it. And once you see that there are also some things that you can say, but does that mean every time I want to do something, then I'm going to suffer? I say, no, that's not what the Buddha actually said. He said there's unwholesome desires and there's wholesome desires. So people will often say, well, why would I even want to meditate? Because wanting is the cause of suffering. Well, actually, it might be mixed, some of your reasons, but there's going to be wholesome things. There's a wholesome reason you want to meditate. There's a wholesome reason you want to be generous. There's a wholesome reason you want to be kind. So there's points of like kindness, for example. You're not necessarily thinking in your head, I'm just going to be nice so I get something out of it. You just want to be kind to someone. Someone's fallen down and you want to help them up. And so we start to discern, okay, there's a difference between wholesome desires and unwholesome ones. And the unwholesome ones, they do something for us. Do you know what they do? They get us in trouble. Right? So they're the things that we engage in that either vaguely or very much with knowledge we know, this is not going to be good for me. And then we say, but I'm going to do it anyway. Which is amazing. Like, why would we do something that's not going to be helpful for us, even though we know that it's not? Because sometimes, we don't know that it's going to get us in trouble. We still do it. It's still intentional. And so it's still not a helpful thing for us. But then there are the things that we do that we know we shouldn't do. And we can't kind of help ourselves. And in fact, Ajahn Chah was quoted as saying that's like 80% of the time. It's like 20% is you kind of know it and maybe you're able to let go. You're able to say, yeah, maybe I won't do that. But then the other time is you know it and you say, nah, I'm going to do it anyway. So we have to be really careful of that. And I think what I'm trying to point to is that, again, like dukkha or a sense of discontent or suffering has a cause, and the cause is because of this desire. And so we start to see in situations, if I end the cause, which is this unwholesome desire, then I end the repercussion of that, which is that I'm going to suffer because of it. And then we start to see like, oh, I see. So there's a pathway here to that. And once we get more and more acquainted with it, then we get more and more acquainted with our desires. And we start to decide like, okay, I'm going to act on this one, or I'm not going to act on this one. We can often start to get a pause in our experience. This is where we're understanding the practice more. We say, oh, wait a minute. This is called pañña. Say, oh, wait a minute. I want to do that thing, but I know what keeps happening whenever I do that. I get in trouble, and it gets worse for me. But I really want to do it. I really want that donut. The second donut, right? And so then you take it, and then oh, why did I do that? And then there's all this suffering around it, right? Or maybe it's the third donut. I mean, I don't want to judge here, but
We have a lot of donuts today.
so yeah, there were donuts offered. Oh, I forgot none of you had them. So, well, maybe afterwards. So the point that I'm trying to make is that once we start investigating and understanding that, then we get to taste the fruit of it when we say, oh, I'm not going to engage in that. I'm not going to actually do that thing, even though I really want to. I really want to say that thing. That person deserves me saying it to them. But I think I'm going to regret it later. And then something magical happens. You decide not to do it, and then you have sukha, you have happiness, as you have this confidence, oh, yeah, I didn't get to say that thing, and they really deserved it, but I'm happy because I think they would have been resentful of me for months, years. Maybe I could have ended a friendship. And so we start to learn, and then we say like, yeah, why did I need, and then we start to kind of question, why did I need to do that thing? I guess I didn't need to. And we realize that these desires, they get us into trouble, and they're not helpful for us. And we start saying, oh, you're a liar. Tell our minds, this is a lie. This isn't true. And then we say, I'm not going to follow that. And it gets easier and easier. And so then we see that ending that cause ends that dukkha, and we see the pathway. So that's how I would answer that.